1909 in Boston to two actors. His father abandoned the family when he was a year old, and then his mom died when he was 2 years old. And I don't know how he got connected to John and Frances Allen of Richmond, but they took poor little Edgar in for pretty much the rest of his life.
I don't have a clear recollection, but I think that they were either friends of the family or they were some kind of relative, aunt, uncle, something like that, and that's how they took him in. It wasn't just some random couple that said,
Right.
"Oh, we'll take this poor orphan boy."
Sure, I'm sure. I mean, surely there was a connection, but I don't know what that
It was a family
was.
connection. I'm almost positive of
I
that.
don't think they were relatives.
Okay.
Okay.
Again, I'm a little fuzzy on that because I've read this so many times. I've kind of glossed over the history.
Yeah, and then more family comes in later, and it's just
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of arrangement was pretty common in those days because people died like flies. So there were a lot of kids left orphaned.
Yeah. So the Allens never formally adopted Edgar, but he did live with them, and they did support him for pretty much like well into his 20s.
Awfully nice of them.
Yes. The father, John Allen, was kind of a jerk. Reports are that he fluctuated between just spoiling the crap out of Edgar and being abusive both emotionally and physically. So it was that like pendulum swing. And so they fought a lot, as you can imagine. And Edgar joined the army under a pseudonym.
Do you know what it is or was?
I'd have to look it up.
Captain James T. Kirk. or
No,
something like that.
nothing like that.
No.
Nothing so
Damn.
awesome as that, I know. But I don't think it really matters that much.
Well, but through his life, Poe did have a penchant for using pseudonyms. He did it a lot.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine that this was, his early stages of doing that, and then he just continued that on through his life because it worked for him. Because, you got to remember, it's the early 1800s. There's no way to verify who you are. Do you have papers? No.
I lost them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you're that guy.
Yep, easy enough.
Yeah, he lied about his age. He was 18. He said he was 21. And then he used the money that he made in the army to kind of start his publishing career as an author. His adopted mother died in 1829, and that caused John Allen and Edgar to kind of reconcile. It was that among a lot of other things. It's a very involved story. Wikipedia will be a friend if you actually care to know more.
Well, and there's all kinds of histories on Poe out there that are in not necessarily internet form, but printed form. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
A litany of books about the guy. So
Of course.
You can pick up any of them.
Yeah. So after Poe got out of the army, he moved in with his widowed actual aunt, like blood relative aunt, and her daughter, Virginia Clem. Virginia was 14 years younger than Poe, but that didn't stop him from marrying her at the young age of 13.
Sorry, having a momentary. This practice is so weird.
That was not that unusual back in those days.
I understand that it wasn't uncommon, but it still doesn't stop me from being skeeved out by it.
It's a little creepy.
There's a bit of speculation around this. There's some kind of mystery around this marriage as well, because since the aunt was widowed, she didn't have any income. The only sole income maker died. Pretty much everybody in that family died, and it was just Virginia and her mom. And Poe wasn't making a lot of money, but he was making money, and he lived with these people. And it's speculated that the relationship with Virginia could have been more of like a sister relationship, and that he saw a way to be able to provide for them by marrying Virginia. On the other hand, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that says actually they were like crazy in love. He once wrote to a friend, "I see no one among the living as beautiful as my little wife."
Okay, right there, that creeps me out. My little wife.
Yeah.
That just. Okay, I'm ignoring this.
Yeah, no, you should. Because Poe had a couple of scandals with other poets of the time, lady poets. But Virginia and Poe were married for 11 years. She got cholera and died at 24. That's 3 very important women to Poe dead, and before he was 40.
Yeah, no wonder he was depressed.
His mother, his stepmother, and his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
rapid fire, but I think as Joe pointed out, this is actually not uncommon at the time. But Edgar Allan Poe seems to have been a little more sensitive to it than I think a lot of dudes, I'm not saying people in general, but dudes of the time were about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. At that time, a few years after she had died, I believe, I don't have the actual dates in front of me because I don't know why. Because I don't know why I didn't write them down. But Poe reconnected with a childhood friend named Sarah Royster, who he may or may not have actually been engaged to before he left for the army. They were friends when he was living with the Allens. And she had accepted his proposal, I think, within a month of his death. Something around that.
Can I ask a question? Because I know I've seen speculation about this. Is that when Poe's adopted mother died, and then his father eventually died, he had expected to get an inheritance from his father. But his father had remarried, and after he'd remarried, written him out of the will. So I know that there was stuff about, well, I'm really broke, and this is really hard. And I've heard some stuff that said that his engagement to her, to Sarah, was some ploy to get him back into money.
We'll actually talk about that.
Oh, we will.
There's some stuff about that in the theories section.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is worth mentioning that Poe, in his entire life, was paid $9 for the Raven. Like, that's the total sum of the money he made off of that, which, granted...
That's the equivalent of, like, $2 million today.
Not $2 million.
No, not quite.
Granted, it is more, right, than we think of. It would buy you more than just a meal, a beer.
That maybe was a couple of months' pay back in those days.
But that's it. Like, that's incredible to me.
For the Raven,
For the Raven.
Yeah.
You guys, just, like, pause the podcast for a second. Take a moment to think about that. Okay, you back?
Yeah.
Cool.
Have you thought about it? Okay.
I mentioned that Poe was found on October 3rd outside a polling station, which was sometimes called Gunner's Hall, but usually called Ryan's Tavern. It's just, again, in the 1800s, you just kind of call stuff what you call stuff.
That's true. I mean, that's how a lot of places got named. Oh, that's Billy's Canyon over there, because Billy lives in that canyon, and then 100 years later it's called Billy's Canyon. It's just how it happens.
His discovery on the 3rd was actually after about a week of totally unaccounted for time. It's one of the other things that makes this such a big mystery. Nobody knows at all where Poe was for that week. At all. There's literally no
I have a theory
information.
about it. But
We'll talk about that
Yeah.
in theories. Poe had left his home in Richmond, Virginia on September 27th. A week prior, Poe's fiancée, Sarah, remarked that he looked ill, so he visited a doctor who was also his friend, named John Carter. Carter advised Poe that he should not travel in his condition. This was, in fact, the day before. He actually visited Carter the day before he left. So Carter said, "Hey, don't travel," and Poe said, "I'm leaving. Bye."
What do you remember? What was what was it? Was it the heart condition? He said Poe had a heart condition?
He didn't say, he said he had a condition.
Okay.
And that
They
Poe
were
had
often-
recently suffered an attack, and if he had another such attack, it would kill us or anything.
I know
like that.
they were so vague about that kind of stuff back in those days.
Yeah.
Like, an attack of, the heebie-jeebies or something like that. That would have been an official
Diagnosis.
back in
Yeah.
those days.
It would have. These are the days of lady vibrators for hysteria.
Yeah. but I do know that there's letters from Poe that talk about having been ill before this trip.
Yep.
And he said something, I think I have the cholera or the spasms, and he'd evidently been taking medication for cholera. So it is evident that there was something not right. What it is, I don't know.
Yes.
But he did have something going on.
Exactly.
So this isn't just out of the blue, one guy's diagnosis.
Of note, just to bring it back to Carter here, is that when Poe left Carter's house, who by mistake, air quotes included, took Carter's walking cane in place of his own. Carter's walking stick had a sword concealed in it. Poe's did not.
Nice.
That's so cool.
There's a letter from Carter about this whole incident, and it says Poe is just standing there playing with the cane, and just kind of looks at Carter and says, "Oh, I'm just gonna go down to the tavern for a minute. I'll be right back," and just like walks out with the cane, never to return.
Yeah, but Poe is noted to be kind of absent-minded, and he had brought his own walking stick in, so it's conceivable.
But he had actually remarked on. He had said, "Oh, this is really nice." Had remarked on it. Carter had been like, "Yeah, I'm super proud of it." Blah, blah, blah. They had a conversation about it, and Poe just kind of looked at it and said, "I'll be right back." It seems the thing that I want to make apparent to people is that it seems from the accounts that this was an intentional thing that Poe did, not necessarily that he thought, "Oh, this is my walking stick, I'll take it." He looked at Carter's and said, "I will have that, thank you."
This is very cool. I will take it now, thank you.
Yeah, obviously his life was under threat, from
and we'll talk about
this. What, and he needed a sword.
There's some dispute, like we talked about earlier, about what Carter told Poe was wrong with him. Some people say that it was a brain tumor. Some people say it was a heart thing. Some people say it was the cholera. If I remember correctly, the cholera had been resolved a month or so prior.
I was going to say,
yeah, so recent, but
because there's a span of time in his letters to people where he says, "I'm so ill I can barely hold a pen or the quill," and then there's letters after that which are dated weeks later. "I feel so much better. I'm a different man."
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely some time.
Yeah, he also apparently had an irregular heartbeat,
which is not always problematical.
No, not always.
I have an irregular heartbeat.
Yeah.
My doctor says it's just
fine.
And
it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it depends. I don't know. He also, Poe, fun fact, pretty much everything you've heard about Poe being a drunk came from his rival writing about how drunk he was all the time after his death.
Yeah, wasn't that Clark Griswold?
Yeah. Poe...
Actually, it wasn't Clark. I'm joking.
Almost all of the accounts from the time... Poe was actually part of the temperance movement. Like, he
didn't drink very much.
Did not
drink. At the time of his death, he was.
At the time of his death, he had a bout of drinking years and years and years and years in his very early life. And it turns out that when Poe drank, he was taken by terrible bouts of insanity. He was such a lightweight that one glass of wine would just do him totally in. He was just smashed after one glass of wine, apparently.
I do want to raise that I didn't really find any accounting of that other than from all of this official stuff from his rival, so I have to question that.
That's fair.
Yeah, there was, I can't remember the guy's name now. I should have written this down when I was researching this. There was somebody else who knew him, who'd known him for many years, who said that they would occasionally drink together, and there was nothing bizarre or anything like that.
They'd get drunk, but that's because they sat around and drank brandy for an hour or whatever.
Yeah, but he didn't. Yeah, nothing about and also, but he also did not appear to be an alcoholic because he would go for months without a drink.
Yeah. I think that as far as I can tell from the accounts, there is some evidence to suggest that he was a lightweight, that he couldn't really handle his alcohol. His sister had the same thing, so. We'll talk about that a little bit in theories as well. I brought that up to mention that the night that he visited Carter, where he said he was going, was down to a tavern, a local tavern. And the tavern owner reports that Poe left totally sober and in high spirits and seemed totally fine. That does not explain why Poe left his luggage in his rented room in said tavern, but that's fine. This actually caused some controversy during the time because when Poe was found, he obviously wasn't coherent enough to say like where his luggage was or anything, and it turned out that it was still in Richmond in this tavern. His nephew went to Baltimore once he found out. Yeah, where Poe was found. Once he found out about Poe, and he and Herring. Sorry, I don't know why I keep saying Herring.
You just don't like that name.
Yeah.
You hate the pattern.
They started searching for the luggage, as you would. You know, if somebody said, well, I don't know where my luggage is, he would go looking for it. And he wrote in a letter, at the time he arrived in the city where he spent the time he was here, or under what circumstances, I have been unable to ascertain. It appears that on Wednesday, he was seen and recognized at one of the places of election in Old Town, and that his condition was such as to render it necessary to send him to the college, where he was tenderly nursed until the time of his death. Mr. Herring and myself have sought in vain for the trunk of and clothes of Edgar. There is reason to believe that he was robbed of them while in such a condition as to render him insensible of his loss. But it turns out it was always in Richmond.
He just didn't take it with him.
He just didn't take it with him.
Which is random.
Yeah.
On
A little
purpose?
Not a
weird.
great sign.
On purpose or by accident?
Who knows?
Yeah.
And again, then there's literally nothing known about that week in between. In between the 27th when he left Richmond and the 3rd when he appeared in Baltimore.
So there is stuff out there talking that this trip that he took, I believe his final destination was New York. Is that right? Because he had a book to edit for somebody, and then he and the woman who had written that book were going to come back, and it might not be New York. I'm trying to remember what city it was. Do you know what I'm talking about? The trip was he was going to go
No, I know
with
what you're
one
talking
student
about. I
and the
just
next.
can't I'm trying to remember where he was going.
Okay,
I
but
can remember that
the
too,
point is
yeah.
that he could have been in any city. So that's an important thing for people to understand is it's not that he went from Richmond to Baltimore and
spent a
hung
week in
out
Baltimore.
in Baltimore for 5 days.
Though it's possible.
It's possible, but he also could have been anywhere else.
Yeah, and
Well,
I'm not
within
sure,
reason.
I'm not sure actually how long it took to travel in those days from Richmond to Baltimore. I mean, that I could easily see that being a couple of days back in those days.
Yeah, I could see that being
It's
a
the
day
train.
or two. Yeah,
he
with the
took
train.
You took the train?
Yeah.
Oh, somebody's-
Because there's talk about people saying, well, maybe he meant to get on one train and was confused and got on the other and accidentally backtracked. And some of this is in for theories, but so he was definitely traveling by train. So I know that for a fact. But he could have been wherever the stinking rail routes went.
Yeah, he could have stopped off or got off the train for a couple of days here, there, whatever. He could have done all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and as mentioned, the liable list reports that his nemesis released after his death said, well, he was on a drunken bender, but no, nobody really believes that. Nobody thinks that. Well, that's not true. Some people do think that, but it's likely that was just made up to slander his name after his death.
I think so.
You know what the biggest tragedy is for Poe after he died is that his rival, and what was the guy's name again? The last name?
His last name was Griswold.
Okay,
Yeah.
what Griswold did, I don't know if you guys saw this in the reading,
I
I'm
did.
guessing you did,
Yeah.
is I don't know how he convinced Poe's family to do this, if they were in need of cash or what, but he bought from them all of his papers and all of his writings and all these letters, and so he was essentially the executor of all of this stuff from Poe, so he had an iron grip on what came out after the fact, which
Yeah.
is just
Clever move.
clever and just cruel.
But I don't understand how I guess the family must not have been aware that this guy was kind of a and was not a friend and an enemy of Edgar Allan Poe.
I have a feeling that they may not have realized the level of venom that was between them somehow, because it was pretty public, but he may not have realized how bad, they may not have known, and so they were like, oh, well, he's being very nice and very, very considerate, and so we need a couple of bucks. So, okay, I mean, I don't get it.
I don't
No,
either.
me neither.
But then again, 150 years later, it's very easy to see the value of those documents. But at the time, they may have had no idea.
The one I like to kind of compare it to is Van Gogh, right? Who was a drunk and literally trying to give his paintings away to have alcohol, and people would say, no, dude, your paintings are pretty bad. I don't want it. Like, that's not worth a beer to me.
So I would buy that guy a case of booze at the time.
Absolutely,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, for the time, his style was a little out there, though. I mean, we all recognize it today as brilliant,
Beautiful, yeah.
and but
Right, but it's exactly that sort of phenomenon that happens pretty
Yeah.
frequently. I think,
he was
for
not.
artists.
Yeah, maybe Poe was not. Well, he was actually pretty highly regarded, I guess, even
Yeah.
at the time. But but now he's like one of the great American authors of all time.
Yeah.
But does this mean, though, that because Griswold bought all this stuff, does that mean that every time I buy a copy of The Raven, then some descendant of Griswold gets the royalty?
I don't know that.
That's an excellent question. We should do some research.
Yeah,
We
That's
should.
another mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys want to talk about theories?
Well, we might as well.
Yeah.
Well,